better, and when you're better, you throw the crutches away. And most of these treatments, you'll be able to stop within the 2 years. The exception, I want people to stay on a nutritional support and something for sleep long term. It decreases the tendency to get thrown back into it when stress is hit. So the study conclusion, and this is Science in the year 2011, is that effective treatment is now available for chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. That's what the study conclusion is. And that's what the reality is today. So let's step back for a moment. Before we go into treatment, I want to look at the symptoms a bit, because even though we talked about tired, achy, brain fog, can't sleep, there's a lot of other symptoms going on in this disease. It's not only those. So many of you will find, in addition to the pain, you've got allergies, a lot of sensitivities. And I want to mention about a treatment. It's a special acupressure treatment that is very good at getting rid of sensitivities. And it's called NAET. And you can find over 12,000 practitioners worldwide at naet.com. To give you an idea of the power of this, I told you that we don't take money from any supplement companies or pharmaceutical companies. That's a lot of money we're turning down each year. But that doesn't mean the companies get off scot-free for the things that I designed for them. My royalties go to charity. And one of the things that the foundation did was a study on autism using the NAET. And there are 30 children in the treatment group, 30 in the untreated controlled group. By the end of 1 year, 23 of the 30 autistic children are back in regular schools, with dramatic increases on all of the outcome scales that were looked at, as opposed to 0 out of 30 in the untreated control group. So these simple things of treating sensitivities can be very helpful. So for those of you who are allergic to everything, when you treat the adrenal and candida issues we'll talk about today, that will usually help. But for those that just have severe sensitivities, it's worth checking out the NAET.com. Dave, do you know any practitioners in the area that do NAET that you'd recommend, or Bonnie?
Yes, we do.
Can you give the name?
Dr. Barbara McNeil in Marietta.
Okay, Barbara McNeil in Marietta. It's very much of an art. Some people are very good at it, and some aren't. So getting a local recommendation is important. Other symptoms, brain fog. How many of you have brain fog? And you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? It's a difficulty with word finding and substitution. So you're trying to think, oh, here's my son, what's his name? Or you substitute the word fork for knife, or you call your husband by somebody else's name. That's not a Freudian slip in this disease. Okay? It's part of the brain fog. In addition, short-term memory, gone. Now there's a third thing that we see with brain fog. It's not that common. You'll see it in about 1/3 of cases, but I want to mention it, where people find that it just happens once in a while. They take an exit off a highway or make a turn in the health food store aisle, something where they're doing a turn or an exit, and suddenly they don't know where they are. Is what? Yep, it has that a lot. And what happens, now you're not going to crash your car, you can drive just fine, but it scares the bejeebers out of you. Because for about 30 to 60 seconds, you don't know where you are. It's not dangerous. It's just part of the brain fog. Now, certainly you want to be checked for other things in CFS in general, but again, that's in a percent of people, that's part of the brain fog, and it goes away with the overall treatment. But just so it doesn't frighten you that that's happening. So, people are often afraid with the brain fog. They're saying, oh my God, am I getting Alzheimer's disease? Or as my kids like to call it, old-timers disease. And the answer is no. And there's a simple way to distinguish brain fog from Alzheimer's. Brain fog is where you keep forgetting where you left the keys. Alzheimer's is when you keep forgetting how to use the keys. They're not the same thing. Now I'm going to note as an aside, because if you look, yeah, exactly. Well, okay, that's good. I want to mention about Alzheimer's for a moment, though, because it's a big problem in this country. In part, one, because it's often diagnosed when people don't have it. You go in with grandma, I'm a grandpa. You go in with great-grandma, and you say, she's kind of forgetful, and the doctor has 5 minutes for the visit, throws one of 2 medications that I consider useless at you, and then says, next patient, I'm figuring she has Alzheimer's. Well, a recent study done in Hawaii, where they did autopsies on people after they died with the Alzheimer's, and they looked at the brains. They found most people diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease did not have Alzheimer's disease. They were misdiagnosed. Why is this important? Because the things they did have were very treatable in many cases. In addition, if you tune up the brain just a little bit, you know how some days a person can remember who you are and other days they don't know. It's not because they grew a new brain overnight and lost it. It's because a 1, 2, 3% difference in brain function is the difference between being able to function versus not recognizing their children. And you can give a little tune-up to the brain, optimizing nutrition, thyroid, sleep, a host of things, and that confusion will often go away. So all of this, it's beyond the scope of the talk, but it's in the Real Cause, Real Cure book. It's also on my website at vitality101.com. There's Health A to Z. You click that, go to Alzheimer's. It's all what to do is, and a new treatment that is prescription but is very helpful is also discussed in there. How many of you have iPhones or Androids? Okay, there's an iPhone app also called Cures A to Z. And it's on the Android also. Over 1 million people have downloaded it. You can look up anything from acne to zoster. It'll tell you just what to do and what the natural treatments are, and even discuss which medications get thumbs up or thumbs down. And it's free, which is nice. So that's an iPhone, and that was actually my wife's idea to do that app. Other symptoms. Many of you find that you have chronic sinusitis or spastic colon. Well, that's candida overgrowth, yeast in most cases. When you treat the candida, the sinusitis and spastic colon will often go away. Weight gain, the average weight gain in 2 studies in our center in this disease, average 32.5 pounds weight gain. And you can't lose the weight till you fix the metabolism, which is part of what the treatments will do tonight. We'll talk about that. Also, libido. In another study, when we asked, how's your sex drive? Basically, 73% of people answered, what's sex drive? So that loss of libido is very common in this disease. And then sugar addiction. How many of you are never met a candy bar you didn't like? You know? Or and the policeman comes up with a gun and they're saying, step away from that cupcake. It's like, okay. So these are things that are part of the disease. There are others, numbness, tingling. There's a host of other symptoms going on. So we talked about basically this illness is an energy crisis where you spend more energy than you can make, and you blow a fuse called the hypothalamus. Here's a picture of the hypothalamus. Now you've seen it. Let's get back to what matters. What can cause you to blow a fuse? Well, infections, hormonal deficiencies, food sensitivities, toxic chemical exposures, toxic boss exposures, toxic spouse exposures, all kinds of toxins. Stress, nutritional deficiencies, poor sleep. Just as there's many ways to blow a fuse, there's many ways to blow a fuse in your body. So if you want to get a sense of why you blew a fuse, a very helpful question to ask is, did the illness start gradually or suddenly? Or differently, I'll say, when did it start? And some people will say, well, I've been sick for like 5, 6 years, but not feeling well for 8 or 9 years. Gradual onset. And with gradual onset, hormonal, such as low thyroid or adrenal, nutritional deficiencies, chronic stress, autoimmune conditions, lupus, Sjogren's, rheumatoid arthritis, polymyalgia rheumatica, a host of autoimmune illnesses will trigger a secondary fibromyalgia. And what happens is you have the lupus, and your symptoms are still bad because of the fibro, and they keep whacking you with all these powerful steroids and things because they're treating the wrong thing. And how do you tell if you have fibromyalgia along with the autoimmune or other disease? Go back to that question we asked before. Do you have severe fatigue, widespread pain? And if you have that, do you have trouble sleeping? Do you have severe insomnia? If you have severe insomnia with fatigue and widespread pain, I recommend also treating for secondary fibromyalgia. So some of you may have heard about Vanessa Williams, who had to drop out of the U.S. Open with her Sjogren's. My suspicion, I don't have access to her records. Sjogren's will cause dry eyes and mouth, which are also common in CFS and fibro, not the Sjogren's. But with that kind of severe fatigue and muscle pain that would make her drop out, I suspect she had a secondary fibromyalgia. Now, other people will say they had a sudden onset. You say, when did it start? And they say, April 17th, 1996. Sudden onset. In those cases, usually it's after a severe infection, often a severe viral infection. It can be after pregnancy. During pregnancy, people usually do fine. It's after the baby's delivered that they crash and burn, or after an injury. It can be a mild fender bender, but very often it's things like traumatic brain injury, especially in our troops coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan. The traumatic brain injury is not being treated properly, especially because you have to treat the hormonal deficiencies. Anybody here have a family member with traumatic brain injury issues? Then let's take a moment, because there are studies, and these are out of the Journal of the American Medical Association. So these are standard studies where they looked at the research in general. And what they found, we talked about the hypothalamic function being down. It showed that hypothalamic pituitary function is severely disturbed in people with traumatic brain injury and missed a very high percent of the time. Even using the very strict testing they use, was missed on the order of about a third of cases. But when you recognize that even the mild to moderate hormonal things make a big difference, I think that the majority of people with traumatic brain injury, if you treat the hormonal issues, will do better. The other thing for traumatic brain injury is people will get microbleeds, and the iron in the blood will trigger an ongoing inflammation. Like a fire, it keeps going until you put it out. So taking antioxidants, especially lipoic acid, 300 milligrams twice a day, and acetylcysteine, and the vitamin powder will have most of the other antioxidants people need. After about even 6 to 12 weeks on the antioxidants, that will put out that fire from the microbleeds, even if those bleeds were years ago. Because the iron continues to stimulate it, it's a free radical reaction until you put out the reaction. Only if they're large enough to show. But with the microbleeds, you're not going to see them on the MRIs and the scans. But it's enough blood going into the tissues to trigger inflammation there. So these simple things can be very helpful for traumatic brain injury, but also the rest of the protocol we'll talk about tonight. So briefly want to mention another book I've done called Beet Sugar Addiction Now, because it's really important to come off the excess sugar. Now I'm going to say avoid sugar, but I am going to add the 3 magic words, except for chocolate. I personally consider chocolate to be a health food. I still remember when I went and started practice 35 years or so ago, and the health food store folks would say, oh, you should have carob. Don't have chocolate, have carob. And I said, that's a great idea. Here's my carob, you give me your chocolate. We'll be friends. But to give an idea, chocolate is helpful for chronic fatigue syndrome. It's been shown to help. Heart disease, the chocolate is over 30 times as effective as the statin medications in preventing heart attacks. All kinds of things. Good cough medication. And you can get the sugar-free ones. That way you can have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. Russell Stover has a good line. There's a little online site called abdallahscandies.com that they have regular ones, but their sugar-free line is excellent. Quirky little company, but good stuff. So you can have your pleasure. But if you want to get rid of the sugar, if you just try to stop it, it's like trying to stop heroin. You're going to go through withdrawal and you're going to hate me. But if you treat the underlying cause of the sugar addiction, and there's usually 4 main things. Most people have it either because they're fatigued and reaching for the sugar and caffeine as an energy loan shark, as we talked about earlier. Other people have it because they have adrenal exhaustion. How do you recognize adrenal exhaustion? That's a stress handler exhausted. Because their battle cry is, feed me now or I will kill you. Okay. How many of you have that thing where when you get hungry, it's like a light switch goes off and you better be fed in the next 3 minutes? Yep, and you got a lot of that. In fact, if I just wanted to set up a stand outside of divorce lawyers or marriage counselor offices, you'd pick up all these people with low adrenal. Because it's when they're hungry, it's not hungry, it's low blood sugar, which is like suffocating. So when you turn to your honey and you say, I got to eat, you're going down the highway over there, and he said, I got to eat. And he said, oh, there's a nice place half hour up the road. And you smile and you say, you will be dead by then? Now, food? That's low adrenal. That's a type 2. We'll talk about that today. Type 3 is a candida overgrowth. That's a yeast overgrowth. And that's what I call the happy Twinkie hunter. You're just going through the cabinet, something sweet would be nice. It's not that irritability. And the 4th type of people who are having depression and anxiety associated with low estrogen, low testosterone, around the menopause. Now, people ask me, like say, they don't pay me to be here tonight because I won't take money from any natural product companies. And the pharmacy, they won't take money from the pharmaceutical industry. I live in Hawaii. God bless, I love West Virginia. It's a beautiful country here. I was raised in Ohio, and I've come to appreciate it even growing up. So why am I here? Well, very simple thing. I had chronic fatigue syndrome back in 1975. I had what I call the drop-dead flu. 6 weeks later, I could still barely get out of bed, and I couldn't function. My brain was a mess. I couldn't do it, and I had to drop out of med school. My professor, God bless them, were really sweet, but they had no clue. They knew there was a virus, but they couldn't identify it. And 6 weeks later, they figured, well, the virus would be gone. He must be depressed or whatever. So I landed up having to drop out of med school. My whole life was geared to being a healer, which meant being a physician. And my dad was dead, so I was paying my way through med school. And that meant no work study, no scholarship, no loans. I was homeless, sleeping in the parks. And it's as if God put a sign on my park bench saying holistic medical school. Naturopaths came by. Herbalists came by. Energy workers came by. All these different people would teach me the bits and pieces that I needed to get myself well. Got well, went back to med school, did very well, and I spent the last 35 plus years with basically dedicated to making effective treatment available for everybody with these illnesses. I've been there. I know what they're going through. I know that you can get well. I've done it myself and have helped thousands of people do it. So given that, what would be more fun to you than going around and telling other people how they can get well too? That's why I'm here, because it's fun. So it's a blast. So that's what we're about here today, teaching you how to get your life back, and you can. So let's take a look at this, and let's see what you can do. So we talked about you have an energy crisis, you've blown a fuse, and to turn that circuit breaker back on, there's 5 key things that need to be treated. You want to know what those are? Let's do it. So this is take-home point number 3, and the key take-home point for the night. To get well, think shine. S-H-I-N-E. Write that down. If you don't have a piece of paper, write it down on your forearm or on the forehead of the person